Jason Thompson, let me begin with you. What is the US president up to with his tweets and statements, sir?
Well, President Trump has always wanted fair trade for the United States. So over the years, the United States has basically given away a lot of money, has been on the losing end of trade, okay, with tariffs, et cetera. So he's just making our position clear that he wants fair trade. That's it in a nutshell, and I don't disagree with anything the president has said.
He was going to meet the leaders anyway. He didn't have to spell it out on Twitter. This is not the way diplomacy is done, as I understand. Meera Shankar, Donald Trump has single-handedly changed the way, would you say, that these affairs are conducted. He says it on social media, and he narrows the room for political maneuvering for everyone involved.
Well, I think that's his style. You have to deal with the styles of different presidents, and this is Donald Trump's style. But I think it's more his overall agenda of putting America first, which has led to growing protectionism and perhaps also skirting the WTO. So if you talk of an international rules-based order, then adhering to the WTO is important. And as far as India's tariffs are concerned, you know, our weighted average tariffs are not that high. Our bound tariffs in the WTO are more. So actually, we are in full compliance with our WTO commitments and in fact have scope to raise the tariffs more. And this is because India has traditionally been a country with a balance of payments problem. We import overall more than we export to the world. So we always have a balance of payments deficit, which we have even now, though it's within manageable limits right now. But say if the price of oil goes up, it's something which impacts India badly and puts our balance of payments askew. So as a developing country with a somewhat fragile balance of payment situation, we have kept this cushion for ourselves in our commitments so that if the need arises and we are really faced with a serious problem, we can have the scope to contain exports if we need to.
Right.
So overall, our weighted tariffs are not that high, and even the US maintains very high tariffs on certain items, certain agricultural products, and so on. Secondly, what India has done is really delayed action, because all of US's allies and friends and trade partners had imposed reciprocal tariff increases when the US had raised tariffs on steel and aluminum. And that is what India had notified. We had notified a proportional increase in tariffs on 28 items, but we had withheld actually implementing it to give scope for both sides to reach agreement through negotiation so that the need not arise. But obviously the talks didn't really fructify, and therefore finally when the US withdrew GSP, in addition to the tariffs imposed on steel and aluminum, then India notified the implementation of these raised tariffs. So it's not something which India has done alone.
Yes.
I think every country which has been subjected to tariff increases has responded in kind to the United States. Now, having said this, I think the US is an important trading partner of India, and we would like to see how we can work our way through these differences.
How do you expect? That's what I was going to come back to, because yesterday,
give and take.
Yesterday in the meeting between Mike Pompeo and Mr. Jaishankar, they sought to downplay the trade differences. And then within hours, the president tweets and says, I'm going to raise this with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which is not the best tone to take, many would say. How do you expect India to respond to something like this?
I think the basic thing would be for both countries to re-engage in discussions on the whole basket of issues which has come up. There are issues from India's side as well, for instance, the GSP withdrawal, the tightening of H-1B visas through executive order, which is causing problems for our companies to deliver IT services in the United States and raising the costs for them, making them less competitive. So I think these are issues which we have from our side on the table, including certain phytosanitary requirements of the US, which debar Indian agricultural products from actually going into the US.
Right.
So there are a range of issues from both sides, and I think we have to discuss these in a spirit of give and take to see where we might be able to strike mutual agreement.
The spirit of give and take, that is the critical aspect of this. Einar Tangen has been patiently listening to this conversation, and Einar, Mr. Trump has a bigger axe to grind with China. How do you expect those talks to go?
Well, right now they're being carefully scripted. You'll note that there is a couple of publications, including South China Morning Post, which has reported that Donald Trump has already laid the plans to defer any type of increase in the tariffs. He had threatened $300 billion. Apparently, that is not going to go through. I think that has less to do with China than it has to do with the overwhelming reaction that he received from the business community in the U.S. over 7 days of testimony, over 300 business leaders and organizations saying that this is a disaster and they're not quite certain why he's doing it. It's going to hurt America and American jobs. But, you know, one thing I note in this is that our first colleague indicated that he agreed with Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump seems to believe that America has been victimized. And it's very interesting from the point of view of the country that is both militarily, economically, and politically the leading country in the world, which has taken home the lion's share of the world's profits over the last 30 years. So I find it hard that you're actually going to get sympathy from people that somehow the richest country in the world, most powerful, is a victim.
Jason Thompson, respond to that. Trump's sense of victimhood, which he tends to extrapolate and raises at every opportunity.
Well, you can still be the richest country in the world and still be a victim because you victimize yourself because of stupid policies. Because of Trump's policies, we've seen, and the deregulations, we have seen so much growth. Unemployment rate is the lowest ever. African-American unemployment rate is the lowest ever. I was just at a grand opening right down the road from my office, Patel Brothers grocery store, huge event. This is happening. America is flourishing because of President Trump's policies. So I understand that there's folks like the person who just spoke that believes that the rest of the world should have some sort of a leveling or socialism type of thing. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm for liberty and free markets, and I know what a great trading partner India is. And we actually have an Indian-American attorney in my office. I expect these negotiations to work themselves out. And one of the things that I've been talking about with other attorneys in my office lately, it's ironic that I'm doing this interview, is that how important India is going to be in the future for the United States. I think they're going to be really kind of like the next China as far as a trading partner. They're going to keep growing and growing and growing, and I look forward to it and those relationships.
Right. May I also add, Jason, that the IMF predicts that the U.S. will lose $450 billion because of the trade war. But having said that, Einar Tangen, is it America's responsibility, just because it's a rich country, to ensure that others grow at the same time? Whatever Jason Thompson was saying, Donald Trump has made no secret of the fact that he is working for the domestic agenda and he's heading into another election. Do you expect him to continue in the same vein then?
Yes, I do, actually. But in terms of the U.S.'s responsibility, remember, the WTO, which we'll be talking about, and all of these kind of edifices were created by the U.S. And the reason was to create a world that was stable and, basically sustainable. Now, Donald Trump has upset that. He's basically said we're going to put America first, and that means in a zero-sum mentality that he has, that everyone else is going to be basically subjugated. I think Donald Trump's idea of the world is really one in which the U.S. is at the center, is the hub, and there's a spoke going out to each country, and the U.S. is able to use its superior military, economic, and political might to extract the best deal. Now, that might be good for the U.S., but it will not create a stable world. 10% of the United States GDP comes from exports of goods and services. If that goes down or becomes uncompetitive, all right, the U.S. will suffer. I know that I was chairman of my state's International Trade Council. I am also an attorney, but I don't believe that the way to the world's future is by putting yourself first, elbowing people aside, treating leaders with disrespect. This is not the way to do it, and it's not about accepting it. If somebody is a rude fellow who has no particular strategy, you call him out on it. You don't say, oh, well, we won't say much because he doesn't know any better. The fact is, Donald Trump should know better. He's president of the most powerful country on earth. He needs to lead instead of whine.
It's not very often that I agree with you, Einar, but here I do. And Jason Thompson, I want to ask you to insult your hosts just before you're going to land in Japan and say if we were attacked, the Japanese would just be watching on their Sony television. The fact is that the US president is going to attend a multilateral summit, and yet the way he's going about it, the fear is that he may hijack the agenda.
Well, I don't know if that's insulting. It's just true. And let me tell you something. One of the differences between this administration and the last is, for example, with Iran, instead of letting the #1 sponsor of terror extort us, he's backed out of the deal. So that's the difference between me and your other guest. What I believe, what President Trump believes, is that it's President Trump saying it's time for America to claim that we're actually really a sovereign country, right? That's not protectionism. That's saying that you're putting your own country first. Every country in the world does that, okay? So we don't, that's a joke to say somehow that's protectionist, because every country in the world wants to do what's best for their own country. That's only natural. It's only natural you want to do that. And it's the term's ressentiment, I guess, right? When you don't like the country because they do well, that's what I'm hearing from your other guest. Is like, oh, well, America does well. So what? They shouldn't? We shouldn't do well? Under Trump's policies, we're flourishing. Democrats want to take us towards socialism while the rest of the world is running towards freedom and away from socialism. That's what President Trump wants. He wants more freedom, more liberty, and that's why we're flourishing here in America. All across racial and ethnic lines. Everyone's benefiting from these policies.
All right. I don't think we're going to agree on this one. But Meera Shankar, I have to end this. But before that, I quickly want to ask you, how does India balance this? On the one hand, we have the Chinese who want India to side with them against this protectionism. On the other hand, you have Mike Pompeo visiting, and as Jason Thompson said, that we expect India's support. And then there's the question of Iran. Mr. Pompeo saying on Indian soil that Iran is a global threat to terrorism. It's a difficult balancing act.
It's a very difficult balancing act and becoming more so. It is, not just a question of balancing on trade. It's also a question of balancing between, India's other partners and the US, given the fact that they have expressed the expectation that India will not buy equipment, defense equipment from Russia, that we should stop oil imports from Venezuela, which we have, that we should stop oil imports from Iran, which we have. But at the end of it, there's a cost.
Yes.
And I don't think that, India would be prepared to give the US a veto over its relationship with other countries.
That is
particularly, long-term partners such as Russia. We want close relations with the US. We have an excellent strategic partnership and growing convergences. But at the same time, we have other interests and we have, other relationships which we need to preserve. And I think Foreign Minister Jaishankar also made that clear when he said that we will do whatever is in India's national interest. I think one point I would like to make to the US, that, while every country likes to protect and promote its interests. At the end of the day, we also want to do it in a way where it's not a zero-sum game.
Absolutely.
I win, you lose. You have to create win-win situations. And if countries around the world grow, it actually provides more markets for the United States. So to follow policies which actually aim at preventing growth in other countries may not be the best way. And finally, that it raises questions about the reliability of the US as a partner.
Absolutely.
And their commitment to rules which have been internationally negotiated and accepted.
Absolutely. Meera Shankar, thanks very much. Einar Tangen, Jason Thompson, thank you for joining us on this show and for sharing your thoughts.